So I spoke a little bit about entrepreneurship, a little bit about year cycles. I do think that all of you, especially the younger people amongst you, need to have this concern about India as a nation and where we are going. I talked about the good stuff. There is also plenty of negative stuff that's happening right now. Lack of concern for the nation, for people, for civic sense, our inability to negotiate globally, for example. India is being blamed for the collapse of the Doha round at WTO, and I hope you people are all aware of that. India is now, a finger is also being pointed at India now for the global climate change agreement. They're saying India is the difficult one. If we can fix India, we'll fix the agreement. So we need to get a little bit more sophisticated in how we deal globally, because we will become a global nation sooner or later, and we have fell on our path. So, and all of that does not come only by government or the large companies. It has to percolate in the entire system. So no matter where you are, what you do, I think some of our value systems need to get more global without losing the Indianness of our values. I think that's our big strength, and we must not lose that. So I shall stop with that because we are already running late. So please fire away any questions that you have, any comments, criticism. I'm happy to listen.
One question, general question. In this meltdown, do you think that Indian style of management has helped us a little bit compared to hire and fire?
Two things have helped us. One is the conservative attitude that we've had as a financial system. You know, in India, a bank can leverage itself only 8 to 12 times. And banks in Europe and US were leveraged up to 50 times, some up to 80 times. That actually helped us. It didn't help us because we were smart. It helped us because we were super scared to actually open up. And so that was very good for us. The hire and fire probably had very little to do with this because the crisis came for different reasons. But having come, by the way, just for your information, we are not the only ones who have a restriction on hire and fire. In Europe, it is very difficult to fire anybody. In France, you can't fire anybody. In Germany, you can't fire anybody. There are plenty of countries which have restrictions on this. But this is something which was like a plague almost, the way it came. I don't think anybody could have stopped this. Our big saving race has been the large domestic consumption and the large savings rate that we've had in India. We had the second highest savings rate in the world. These two have been very helpful, and our lack of exposure to the international markets, which is in effect a weakness. But in this case, it actually helped us.
And if you had to start an organization now, would you believe in hire and fire philosophy? Or
I don't think there is. Let me try and answer that. I don't think there is any company in the world wants to hire and fire. And nor is that what Indian industry has been asking of the government. In fact, it's a very major misconception that industry wants the ability to hire and fire at will. If you do that, you'll never get good people. Your strength, as I said, inside is only people. You have to be able to take people to task if they don't perform. Consequence management is one part which is missing from India. Why have governments been inefficient? Because there is no consequence if you manage something well. You don't get a pat on the back or an incentive, and there's no consequence if you manage anything badly. So consequence management is all that you want freedom for. You also don't want restrictive policies. There's a policy today which says, "Aapko matke mein thanda pani rakhna padega." So in effect, all of us are criminals right now by that law. We are falling foul of that law. You are not allowed to keep water in the cooler because no coolers existed when the law was designed. We have not actually learned to modify things as the environment changes. So the requirement is to be able to modify, to take into account what is the current environment. You have seasonal businesses. Now for a seasonal businesses, you cannot hire a person all year long. So you bring a person who otherwise doesn't have a job. So you're actually doing a favor to them. It's not something, you're not trying to punish them. The bargain, what is happening with the current we have a very stiff policy. Our problem is with the policy being restrictive and stiff, not being there. We need to have a policy. Otherwise there would be abuse of the completely on the reverse side. I don't think anybody wants to encourage that. But you need to find a way to encourage overall growth. Today the government is trying to protect individual jobs. The government's role must be to encourage overall growth. If the policy was relaxed, every company would be happier to hire more. Today you want to get out of the system, you don't want people, because once you're in your system, there's nothing much you can do after that if you're not happy. So whether it's contract labor, whether it's casual labor, the entire system needs to get a little bit streamlined to recognize the realities of the marketplace.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I mean, for last 2.5 decades, or for 25 years, Hero Honda is consistently maintained its position as the number one in two-wheelers and motorcycles to be precise. Now, year after year, how you been able to maintain? There'll be new influx of competition. There'll be new products. Sometimes you feel the products are either comparatively better than your products or comparable. Still, year after year, ensure that the percentage is higher. Bajaj or XYZ, Yamaha coming new products. You're still the leader. So how do you do it? From a micro perspective, how does one understand that?
I don't think there is any one thing which defines what happens to a business. It cannot be, because a business is like a large family. So there are people who behave differently in the family. Each one of us has many attributes. All the attributes I have are not good attributes. They are not all bad attributes. So we are all kind of made up of many different things. If you can find the ability to pick some of the good attributes of any organization and kind of focus on moving those forward, your ability to take decisions actually becomes much better. And ability to take forward-looking, sensible decisions is better for sure. What we have been able to do, I think, over time. One, when we started, and Mr. Pradhan sitting at the back will know this, people actually pointed a finger and laughed at Hero Honda, saying, "You guys first don't know anything about the business, then you're coming in with a 4-stroke. Who would make such a complicated engine? And who would pick motorcycles over scooters?" I don't know if you remember, when we got into this business, there was an option to go into one or the other. And Kinetic Honda had scooters and we picked motorcycles. This is the belief on the future of the nation. It was actually a bet, it was a gamble, really, that this is the way India will go. If you make a good product, people basically are very, very smart. If you give them a choice, they will make the right choice. So if you have a product which meets the aspirations of the individual, and you do it in a manner where you meet the benchmark price perception, then value for money becomes important. We are an unusual market. That's in one way we are unusual. In many other ways, we are following some of the developed economies 10, 15, 20 years behind. But we are a little bit unusual in the sense of our cultural imperatives. We are one of the few countries where price is more important than value for money. And I'll try and explain that. If you, in your mind, have a picture that I'm going to go and buy a car for 5 lakhs or 6 lakhs, whatever the price line is in your mind. You go and see a car which is, the dealer says is very good, but it's 7 lakhs. But because it's 7 lakhs, your mind is not open to look at it. I don't mean you particularly, I'm saying as an Indian consumer, this is Indian consumer behavior. So one of the things we've actually tried to do is map behavior of individuals and how it's actually changed over time. We also believe the answers actually come from the marketplace. So we've tried to listen. We've tried more to listen to criticism, as I said inside. We believe that tells us a little bit more than ourselves saying, "Oh, by the way, I have a smart idea. I know what the next design of the motorcycle should be." Of course, we all have ideas. But if you listen to a few 100,000 people, it's likely that when you put that idea down, that's a product they're likely to buy more than the one that you had in your mind. The other thing I believe we have done is treat this business like a large family. This is a word, if you interact with our company, you will hear this word again and again, that this is a large family. And we've tried genuinely to behave in that manner. It's not always easy, because like in any family, there are always going to be issues. People have different ideas, different behavior, different aspirations. So trying to marry the ability to allow people enough individual enterprise, yet have them running in some kind of a cohesive manner. I think that's one of the things which is a challenge I believe we've done a little bit better than others. And I'm just coming down to the fundamentals. There are many other aspects to this, as you know.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm glad we spoke about change and then automobile sector we spoke of price. I think what's happening across the world is there's radical changes taking place, and a lot of technologies are allowing things to become free.
Yep.
And like for example, the Nano has become so cheap.
Yep.
We are working with some of those automobile component companies which are making that happen.
Correct.
Now, in the auto sector, do you think it's possible to actually, work towards something where you're going to make something almost free, where price is lower than cost?
Yeah.
And is there some work towards that?
Sure. Arun Netrawali was here, I'm trying to remember, 7-8 years ago. Arun is the head of Bell Labs, or what is called Lucentech now. They have done some very interesting pioneering work in terms of research on communications and other stuff of that type. He made two very interesting comments. I think I have 30% odd Indians working with me. If I had my way, I would take this number up beyond 50%. Because they have this ability to multitask, which is unusual in most. Anglo-Saxon as a race cannot do that. Okay, so we have a unique advantage, which is also why disruptive technologies, which have not unfortunately been commercialized because we're not good at that side, we're not good at branding. Disruptive technologies have come out of India, disruptive systems have come out of India for a long time. He had said that in the next 20 years, I think it was 20, he said, because he named something, I forget now, 18 years or 20 years, we will make telecommunication completely free. Because the cost of billing will be higher than the cost of providing the bandwidth to the people to communicate. And if I look at what he said now, that is 10 years ago. It was unbelievable at that time to imagine this that's going to be, and we're almost there. We're going to be there pretty soon. We're not too far from there. If you look at what has happened in, I don't know how many of you heard the name of Jaipur Foot. Jaipur Foot is a charitable foundation which makes prosthetics, legs and for people who lost their feet or legs, etc. Jaipur Foot has produced this prosthetic at a price, depending on the model, between 1/16th to 1/50th lower than the same product in Europe or in the US. And increasing, and interestingly, with a higher and a better application. This is the only one which comes close to, well, I shouldn't say the only one, because now you have these new ones which have sensors and stuff in them. Until now, it was the only one which came close to being almost real, where a person could climb trees, and they actually demonstrate that, by the way, in Jaipur Foot. So I believe we have the potential to do it. Disruptive ideas are very, very powerful. Our weakness lies in our discipline to implement and to market. And as we get better at that, I think this will happen more and more. Nano is a case in point. Who would have imagined when this car got announced? Who would have imagined it was possible? Maybe it's not 1 lakh, but it's close enough to be a completely disruptive product in this automotive market. You go to any auto show, if this car is there, you will see 50 to 60% more number of people around this car than any other booth or stall. Yes, please.
So we talked about pat on the back, we talked about hire and fire. So what are the practical ways that you are implementing in your company to motivate people around to do the job, get the job done? Practical ways, practical solutions that you
I didn't quite understand the question, but I thought these are practical things that we do. But what we try and do is, when somebody comes in, we try and spend a little bit of time on the people. First, we take a long time to hire anybody. Our attempt is once somebody comes into the system, he or she should stay there and should retire from there. It doesn't always happen. In fact, in the last few years, we've actually seen attrition in our companies, which was unusual for us. Before that, we had never seen any. Well, I shouldn't say never, but attrition was close to zero, close to nil. And interestingly, most people who leave the organization, at least 80% of them will always want to come back. And we had enough occasions when people like that. So, first our attempt is to find the person's mind and will. Because the rest of it, we believe we can coach them in the actual work skill. For example, we've set up a new plant for motorcycles in Haridwar now. Went into production last year. That has become the world's most productive plant. There is not one single person in that plant hired from another company. Not one. We hired everybody fresh and we trained them ourselves. We spent a year extra, in the sense we hired them 1 year before the plant went into production. And we do 3 kinds of training, which is ongoing. One is specific to the machine or the job the individual does. 2 is organizational training in terms of systems, etc. in the company, what is good, what is not good, how do you ask for leave, etc. And 3rd is completely unrelated to work. Whether it's training on personal accounting, or it's yoga, or it's family's health. We do that as an as important part of training as the training on the machine for a worker. In fact, in our newer companies, in all our new companies, we don't have a quality department. We just stop building any quality control department. We don't hire anybody for quality. The idea is that any individual who's working, the expectation is that he or she actually makes the right quality, because they are the ones who make quality. In most companies, the job of the quality department is to pass or reject. They don't make any quality. They don't create quality. They just select. So why have an extra person when you as an individual can do a job yourselves? Why do you need another person? So trying to instill a sense of responsibility in individual in some ways is the biggest thing that we believe we can do. It doesn't always work, but it works more often than not. Yes, please.
I'm glad you talked about quality. Somehow, service industry, what is your message for the service industry as far as quality goes? I mean, service industry at times perceives quality to be a little nebulous area.
They say one of the most difficult industries to run is hospitality. Hotels, for example, where we are. The reason being, we're dealing with people all the time. A guest can come in at 2:30 at night and say, I want a cheese sandwich. Okay. Saying, sorry sir, I don't have cheese. And the guy can blow his top. So, service in that sense is the ability not only to provide what you have written and documented as a guarantee, is to be perceptive, to see what is it your customer or consumer is not saying, to meet that need as well. It's both expressed and implied needs, which truly make the difference between quality and high quality. And if we can be perceptive to that, I think our ability to deliver becomes better. The other is the commitment to understand that it's actually your customer who pays your salary, it's not your company. The moment you understand that, your whole system actually starts to get aligned to thinking about that as your main focal point of the business. Otherwise what happens is, in most companies, power blocks get built, the department head becomes the focal point. And he or she may not even be important in the larger scheme of things. But because you report to her or to him, you start to see their nod as your quality nod. And I don't mean to say it badly, but quality as a concept is something which is unfortunately not coming naturally to India in the global sense. We have a different sense of quality because of the way we've been brought up. But this is something that we have to actually actively work at. We have to make that extra effort.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
In business schools, there's a very popular word, co-opetition.
Yeah.
You are probably one of the very few people around the world that are actually co-opting.
Yeah.
You have a very strong collaboration with the Hero Group,
Yeah.
with the Honda Group, with
Yeah.
the Hero Honda. And yet Honda competes with you in the motorcycle market under their own brand.
Yeah.
And any thoughts around that, and how do you manage that? Because it's a pretty unusual and an interesting situation.
It is. There are 2 or 3 different aspects to this. One is what is not a very well known fact, and we don't announce this ourselves because some of our customers don't like us to announce it, is we are also amongst the few companies who works with competition, in the sense we supply them components. To some of our fiercest competitors, we supply components from some of our companies. The idea there again is that if you can understand what it is you're trying to achieve in the business, and you focus on that as your fundamental, everything else is frankly only fluff. It kind of tends to work out well. And whether it's a conflict which somebody mentioned, or you call it corporate governance, if you can focus and say, this is my objective, that is 2 partners, this is what you bring to the table, this is what I bring to the table, both of us collectively can help this joint entity that we own to develop. All of the rest of it kind of tends to fall into place. But it is sometimes very complex and a very difficult thing to do. We've also obviously had occasions when we had differences with our partners. Like any 2 people, we can always have differences. And we've had plenty of occasions because the partnership is not 25 years old. In fact, it's become somewhat legendary. Many business schools are doing studies on this company. How can a Japanese partnership last so long? Because they're not considered amongst the most open people in the world. As a race, the Japanese are very, very closed. They have very strong ideas. and they stick to their own ideologies, which is the way they are. They are just like of that. Genetic breeding is of that nature. But whenever we had a difference, we've said, let's not look at what's good for you or for us. Let's look at what is good for this entity. If you can find that answer, then the problems kind of tend to fall away. As I said, it doesn't always work easily, but if you try and bring yourself around to that, it does work.
But it requires a very high degree of maturity.
It requires discipline, it requires maturity, it requires ability to follow through after making a commitment. That sometimes becomes even more difficult.
From experience, what do you think are some of the unique challenges of doing business in India compared to maybe some of the other more developed nations across the world?
I think one of the big challenges in India is not a country. India is a continent, and it's a group of disparate markets. We have 28 states, we have 17 officially recognized languages by the government of India, we have 5,000 plus dialects spoken across the country. Our people don't look similar. If you go through north, south, east, west, they eat different food, they speak different language. The reason I'm saying this is, this creates different cultural preferences. It's very, very hard to understand sometimes. It's not as if people are not different in other countries. If you go to Germany, North Germany and South is different. But there are 4 types of people, let's say in Switzerland, for example. There are only 4 types, broadly. No country has this complexity. Also, part of this is in our DNA. I'll give you a real example. McDonald's used to pride itself, still prides itself, on its training program. They produce, they say, the most consistent quality across the world, across all geographies. You can buy French fries in Chicago, in Moscow, in Delhi, or in New York. It will be the same. They came to India and they said, we know what's good for people. And so that what happens, that creates an attitude saying, we know what's good for you. So they came into India, and obviously their system did not work. Because first, you don't eat beef. Their biggest seller is a hamburger, which is made with beef. By the way, the cheeseburger is also made with beef. Okay? And this is a mistake many vegetarians make when they go out. You ask for a cheeseburger, presuming you're going to get cheese. And what you get is a patty of beef with a little thin slice of cheese on top. And so they had to relearn. They created a new recipe and a new menu for the first time in their history, by the way, when they came to India. It's the first time they ever changed. However, the good thing is that you have to realize how smart the company is. After making the mistake, after learning or relearning, they then took this idea to other parts of the world. Now you can buy a shawarma in a McDonald's in the Middle East. So they've localized the taste in many places, which is something which usually large multinationals are not able to do. Because in their belief, creating consistency across the whole product chain, value chain, and geography is their unique strength. So in India, that's not possible. Even if you sell a simple product like a bicycle, we know for a fact that green ladies' bicycles will sell in one part of the country. They will not sell in another part of the country. So and a lot of this is also then goes into the next levels beyond that on how we behave. If you give the same instructions to a person in one part of India, they are perceived in one manner. In another part, they are actually perceived differently. So this is a great complexity of India as a nation. As I say, anything you hear in India about India at any one time is true, and the exact opposite is also true. And that's because of the way we are. As I said, we are like that only.
So we are planning for 2 last questions.
One I had. In say today's scenario, the market collapsed further and you need to go for cost cutting. So what are the 5 areas where you would say that you would go for a cost cutting, and if you can share your thoughts that why those areas?
What do you do?
I run my own company.
What kind of company?
It's into intellectual property research, so it's a knowledge process outsourcing.
Okay. People got a little bit upset with me when I said a few months back, that what has happened in India is actually very good for India. What tends to happen is when the going is good, we tend to take things for granted. We allow fat to build within the organization where it's not necessarily required. we tend to ignore things like quality, service, and we completely forget that the customer is actually more important than the rest of our business. So, in a crisis, what comes back to you is, by the way, if I can focus on the fundamentals of my business, everything else falls into place. What are the fundamentals? Look at what your customer is asking you, telling you. Try and go back into your entire value creation chain and just focus on that. Because anything you do, every